So today we've got our first artist. Is that right, Dan?
I don't think it started.
Oh, mine's got 8 seconds on. Oh, that's good. I've got to say, that's
wow.
good.
There's a new one, right? There's a new one. And you can see my face.
You should do stand-up.
Oh, God.
Okay, funny, Dan. So we have got an artist, haven't we?
We have got an artist.
Who was... So Dave Buonaguidi's a phenomenal ad man, maverick character who's been everywhere, done everything. You know, he started For Creative. He was at Howell Henry at the beginning, launched St. Luke's, Karmarama. I mean, pretty exceptional character. But weirdly, when we spoke, doing our research, not a whole lot of billboards are forthcoming. So I'm quite excited because we're going to talk more really about the arty stuff and the make tea, not war is a big thing, obviously, from the anti-war march. But then we're hopefully going to talk a lot about, Suffolk is always a good idea, stuff like that, which I absolutely love. And they're all posters, so it's completely legit and a lovely, new angle, I suppose, for us.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to hear from him about his jump from advertising / creative agency to something that's a bit more passion driven for him, because it's obvious that he's got a passion for creativity, but now kind of going from creative as a job to passion on creativity, and then now having creativity and passion as a job for him working for himself is going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think I could see, because I've sort of followed his progress. I could see he was getting into the map posters printing, and several friends of mine had them, and I thought, oh, those are quite cool. A nice little side hustle, sort of project. But it's obviously he's just gone balls out for it, and I think it's doing really, really well. I think he's just caught, without sounding like a cock, he's caught the zeitgeist, and he's now riding the wave, and he's sort of being very cunning on how he does them and who he pushes it out towards, and they're virtually becoming like topical pieces of art in a way, which he picks up on the election and the pandemic, and it's great. I find it really inspiring.
Yeah, very good.
Okay,
let's get him in.
Let's get him in. Dave Buonaguidi, ad man, biker, artist, and general provocateur. Welcome to Behind the Billboard.
Hi there.
Hi. Thanks for coming on. Where do we see you? I'm seeing you not in a studio with loads of paint everywhere. You're sitting at home, right?
I'm in my, this is sort of my work room at home.
Right.
It's got my little gold-plated...
You got your stars and stripes?
Stars and stripes, AK-47. I'm representing everybody.
A bit of everything.
Everything, yeah.
Is that a map of Capitol Hill on the background there? Is that what we're...
It could well be. A couple of riot shields and some Molotov cocktails.
Yeah, people can't see. Yeah, and that horned hat looks really good on you, Dave.
Yeah, I know. It took me ages to try it.
I did notice on your feed you're in a new studio. Is that right? You've just...
Yes. Yeah, I'm currently. Well, I was working out of Print Club London, which is in Dalston. It's a sort of shared studio space where they have 10 machines and racks and all that kind of stuff. And I used to print there, but obviously since it's all started to get hairy, they're letting people back in, but you're only allowed 5 people in at any one time. And we had an outbreak where somebody caught it, and then it kind of had to lock down and everything. So I was just like, well, I need to make sure I'm working the whole time. And I just thought maybe now's the opportunity to get a space. So literally I moved in last Monday.
So does that mean you can be sort of more isolated?
Totally.
Is that a shame that you don't get the banter with the sort of your buddies from across
I was in there the whole of yesterday and it was doing my nut because, there's nobody. I've got the radio on. And I'm talking to the people on the radio. It's awful.
What radio is it? 6 Music?
6 Music, yeah, of course.
Oh, thank God. Otherwise, we're going to have to stop the podcast right there. Brilliant.
I'll sit there having conversations with Lauren Laverne and shouting at people. And
okay, quick one on that, right? So I was mortified when Sean Keaveney was moved from breakfast to the afternoon, because I used to listen to Sean and then go to work, but now I don't go to work. Yeah. I get both of them. And it took me a long time to get into Lauren Laverne, but now I can't believe I'm going to say it. I'm liking her more than Sean Keaveney. I hope Sean Keaveney's not listening to this.
She's good.
She's really good.
I mean, both of them are good, but she's good. She's good.
So look, Dave, just the last thing on the sort of studio intro bit. I'm loving his slogans. You're a man who loves a slogan. Any controversial slogans bubbling under today, the last few days? Anything going to be screen printed tonight, like Everton 5, Spurs 4, something like that? Sorry, Dan.
I would never do that. I'll tell you, one of the things that I try and do is, and obviously the slogans thing is absolutely kind of rooted in my background in advertising, but it's also trying to make sure that I don't do a lot of that, because there's a lot of shit around with slogans, live, love, laugh, and all that kind of cock. And so what I try and do is I've become sort of obsessed by language and slang, especially, but also kind of being very, very the sort of brutality of it. And the thing that used to kind of trigger me was an old book that my Italian grandmother gave me back in the 70s, which I've still got, which was an entire compendium of World War II history. And one of them was one of the books within the annuals, which is the only one I've kept, was about propaganda posters. And I love that, simple words with a picture asking you to do something. And often it was something quite dramatic, which was either, stop fucking talking, or do more of this, or join up. And it was, I don't know, I just found that kind of language and that visual language colliding together was very powerful. So falling into advertising was something that felt kind of normal. But
and was that a book that she gave you when you were young, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, she gave it to me when I was probably 10 or 11, yeah.
Right. And do you think that, so you think that had an influence on your kind of, your
massively.
love of, right.
Yeah, massively. I mean, there's loads of things that I'm doing now that I remember trying to do when I was at college back in the 80s, or, having read that book, and I was trying to do in advertising. Loads and loads of things all start coming up, and I think, fucking hell, everything feels like it's been leading to this sort of, this moment. Or I'm having a breakdown. It's either one of the two. I can't work it out.
So we've got to thank Grandma Buonaguidi for this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I hope you're going to credit her in all your work.
Yeah, of course.
So obviously today we're talking mainly billboards, and before we get to yours, before we get to the kind of you, I mean, there's some incredible work we're going to look through today and talk through. Have you seen what? I mean, you said you spending more time on your own in your own studio, but when you're on your way to the studio and back from, have you seen any good billboards lately? Anything good out of home that you've been kind of in awe of?
When I started in the 80s at TBWA, posters were, I think, the highest form for me. They were the highest form of advertising creativity. I grew up in that era where, they were doing fucking Araldite ads with cars stuck on the poster saying also sticks handles to teapots. And so I remember seeing that stuff and just being mesmerized by it. When I worked at Chiat Day, we went over to the Chiat Day offices in LA, and we're reminded of those great posters they did for the Olympics, where they had, and also for Super Bowl, where they had cross freeway posters where they had a quarterback throwing the ball and then a guy catching it on the other. I mean, a big painted, beautiful kind of iconic, and I just love that. And it was when advertising had an element of the art to it, because illustration was powerful. There were fewer words, or the words had a kind of rhythm, almost a musical rhythm to them, and they didn't have to sell too hard, because the idea was king. I think what happened, obviously, when the internet turned up and you had things like data and Excel spreadsheets, where clients suddenly realized a lot of agencies were ripping them off, and the quality of the work nosedived, because they would come to the agency and say, this is what we want. Stop being creative. We don't care about, ultimately, we're not really that bothered about awards, but what we care about is that you spend our money correctly, and it helps our business because that's what we're ultimately employing you to do. And I think that posters went from like I said, my point of view, I think, with the arguments about TV being, or cinema being the highest example of advertising creativity, but posters went from there all the way down to the bottom, which is, over the last decade, posters just become like end frames on TV commercials, where they just have way too much information and a boring picture of a car with a boring line. I mean, I think it's mind-numbingly painful. Obviously, sort of saw some stuff. The stuff that Niels had done at his place for, the beer brands kind of stood out. That's the thing I've seen for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we talked about that very briefly with John Hegarty a few weeks ago, that one of the things that really needs to, the stuff that elevates recently, Niels is a great crafter of the medium. So the B&Q stuff and the Brewdog stuff that we've talked about on the pod, there's a real craft to it, and I think one of the reasons that it rings your bell will be because of that. I think on the poster mentality, certainly on the B&Q and Brewdog stuff, it fulfills on the simplicity of a great idea executed for a poster. And I think one of the things that's missed on, you think about things like financial institutions and mobiles, and that the advertising with advertising standards, with all of that copy that has to sit on there legally now, that your home is at risk if you don't make mortgage repayments. That stuff, because it has to be there legally, has kind of detracted from the craft of a classic, simple poster.
I think it's bigger than that as well. I think you've got weak people in agencies who are terrified of losing clients. You've got clients who don't like agencies. I mean, the relationship is broken down. It's like a bad marriage where they just keep coming in and they do what they've got to do. And nobody has a voice anymore. There is no personality. I can't think of the last agency I heard of where they had, a Gold Grimley's Trot type mentality where it was like, this is what we do. Every agency now will do everything they possibly can to win a piece of business, however big or small, and hold on to it. And, I just remember having so many conversations where you sit in a meeting and you present a piece of work that you think is really interesting. And you can just see around the table, you can sense the fear that people are going to have to, try and talk to a client about doing something that you might not expect. And as we all know, if you've worked in a business, any business for a long time, when it becomes a checklist where you're given 12 things to put in your ad, you don't need an agency. You just get a production company to do that, and they'll do it for you, an editor who'll cut it together for you. Often I think the most interesting creativity comes from when you say, these are the 12 things you want, but I tell you what, we're going to put 3 of them in, and we're going to add in 2 others that you didn't know about. And then that throws it all over. It's called progress. I think we've hit a wall now where, a lot of advertising is so prescriptive, it's colouring in. And I think it felt embarrassing for me towards the end when I would call myself creative. I wasn't being creative at all. I was literally just colouring in stuff.
Do you think, Dave? Because I concur. I mean, I think we try and get to the good stuff on the show, and I think there has been some pockets of hope. But I think what they do now, because the general standard isn't great and there's less of it, if you do something half decent, it does become incredibly elevated. Going, oh my God, look at this! It's amazing, and stuff is good. But there was the Spotify stuff and Dracula, B&Q. KFC. We've picked up on them. But it doesn't feel as rich a period as it.
There are tiny pockets though, and that's what's so sad is there's not enough of it around.
I know.
And also, I mean, you've also got another issue, which is I think education is pretty bad. There aren't great colleges churning out great people anymore, and so you've got this kind of slight. I don't know. It just feels like an impasse. I don't really know what's going to happen.
I think that's a good point, actually, Dave. It's something that we've noticed that those once great colleges have almost become businesses in their own right. So their job is to churn people out. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to do some judging once for a college that will remain nameless back in the 90s when I was at St. Luke's, and I was told you're not allowed to fail anyone whose name you can't say. And I was like, what do you mean? And he says, well, we've got 70% of the people here are Chinese, Korean or Japanese. You're not allowed to give them a fail. the worst thing you can give them is a 2-1.
Oh
and
my God.
you've got to send them back to the old country with a pass and a degree. And when they go back, they tell 20 other people and they sign up the following year. So it becomes
because it was worth 10 times more to them than domestic.
More than domestics. Which I just found, slightly harrowing. I mean, I know it's a reality of the modern world where you've got to, make money and turn it into, become more business minded. But I think there's also a duty for agencies to put their money where their mouth is, or their mouths are, to create their own talent. To find young talent, and not internship, but get people in and then build.
No, maybe it is. Maybe it's an apprenticeship, though. Why shouldn't it be an apprenticeship?
That's kind of what we used to try and do at St. Luke's and Karma Armour as well, was just find interesting people and then develop them and turn them into what you wanted to be and or what you wanted them to be, so you could hire them. And I just think you've got this sort of funny dilemma where you've got people who don't work in the business anymore teaching people who are going to come into the business, and the business is so complex and so it's just developing. It's developed more over the last 10 years than it probably has over the previous 30. But it's like it needs an injection of enthusiasm and.
I think it's before that, though, Dave. I really do. My godson is 15 years old. He's about to do his nearly 16. He's about to do his GCSEs, and he's got a massive love of art. And I remember doing mine at that age, and it was mainly fine art, and it was learning to use the tools in front of you. Maybe it's a nature of the digitization of our craft, but I'm not sure he's touched a paintbrush this year because it's all
how horrendous is that?
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
You're learning
also
art
just
and design.
Talking about referencing artists and other creative minds. I remember talking to creatives at Karma Armour and saying, what about if you were to look at this a little bit like this and whatever, and they would just look at me blank, and I was like, hold on a second, I'm talking about the fucking pop art movement, for example. You go, not Andy Warhol, but you go Robert Rauschenberg or Klaus Oldenburg, and they would just sit there going, who?
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck me, it's your business. You should be sort of interested in.
Maybe the creative agency's responsibility extends down to that age group. And John Hegarty talked to us about going to Hornsey Art College as a 14-year-old on a Saturday afternoon. Maybe the creative agency world needs to kind of take a stand in education and say, well, no, we're gonna start embracing ideation and craft from an early age for secondary school kids and get them working in kind of understanding the medium.
Making creativity and thinking part of the curriculum. Well, this is interesting. This was something that when I left Karma Armour, I had an opportunity. I had a year where I wasn't allowed to work. And I got into screen printing, but I also was trying to get a free creative school off the ground called Gratis, which was funded by industry. So it would be agencies, design companies, fashion companies. I had Ted Baker on board. You just had, 25 really interesting companies. And then when you became when you joined up, when you were recruited, and it was going to be using somebody, I can't talk about it because he wasn't allowed to do it at the time, but to come in and, have an 18-month course, you'd have a year boot camp where you would be, just exposed to, history of everything, just fucking, it was, and you were literally in a hotel. So you would be, away from the rest of your world. And then you'd have 8 months or a year out in the streets, kind of, doing 3 weeks at Ted Baker, 3 weeks at AKQA, 3 weeks at Karma Armour, whatever it might be. And it was just a way of, so that it wasn't about advertising. It was just about applying your creativity in the commercial world. So you would be taught by people in industry, because the people who effectively owned it or created the wagons around it were all people in industry. So it was live and it was relevant and zeitgeisty. And then, ideally you would create these 25 people, 30 people, and then the people who created them would then choose who they wanted, or they could move them around. And it just became, the ultimate thing is no one really gives a fuck. And this was the issue that we had. Government didn't really give a fuck, or they did, but they wanted it up in Hull, which was fair enough. I would have done it up there, but it was they just wanted to plough money into what they call Northern Powerhouse. And the people that we were talking to, none of the agencies could sit there and stump up the 15 grand a year needed. And it was just because you knew that, once you'd signed off the money, the creative director who signed it off would get fired or would move on, and then somebody procurement would look at the numbers and go, "What's this 15 grand going to cost?" And you spend your whole fucking time trying to chase that up, and it just became impossible.
I definitely think you're right to bring that back, Dave, because I think at the moment, we're certainly what we're going through right now with the pandemic and the way that certainly young talent is going to waste because they can't get jobs and the agency.
Well, I think there's a bigger question, which is what that young talent is doing with the work. One of the reasons and the eye-opening moment for me with the difference between art and advertising. I would sit there, call myself creative, and I would, I'd sit there, do 100 ideas, and I'd make one of them if I was lucky, and it would probably be shit. Because it needed to be passed through. It needed to be, passed through the 15 stomachs of the client and the 12 stomachs of the ad agency, and everybody has a fucking opinion and a voice, and because it's all about collaboration, which I'm absolutely good for. I love all of that kind of stuff. But when it becomes to the detriment of what you're trying to do, which is just all we're doing is squirting out very bland vanilla ice cream, because it sort of suits everybody. It's like fucking Muzak in lifts. It's just it's okay, but it's expensive.
And so going back to kind of the medium and your initial love of it and the joy that you got from the book from Grandmother, do you think that there is a way back for our industry to get back to the heyday and the craft? Because you talk about it being one of your favorite mediums. Is there a way for us to get that back?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's past really. I think it was, it was of an age where agencies were trusted implicitly to do the right thing for their clients. A lot of agencies didn't do the right thing with their clients, and this is sort of comes on to my slight phobia about awards and all that kind of stuff. What the ad industry did was they built another industry around the industry that they were already there to do, which was we're here to serve our clients and do the best thing for them and improve their business. And then they built the awards thing to help satisfy them in some other way. And it became, I just found the whole thing sort of started to invert on itself, which is ultimately what it's done. I don't think it'll ever return. I think it will have to develop into something else. I think, the good thing is during these crazy age, the pandemics and the recessions and the depressions that are probably going to come our way, I think what will happen is you will get an influx of new, interesting businesses on both sides, new clients coming up, new agencies coming up with new ways of working. It's just called progress. I think yearning for the past is kind of a waste of time, really. It will just, it won't come back. Because I think that information is too valuable now.
One of the trends that I'm loving seeing is these kind of the birth of the boutique agency where there is a real love of craft. And, we've talked to a few people recently, they're kind of the art directors who turned founders of a relatively small agency compared to the big boys and the network agencies. And I'm loving seeing the work that they're producing because there is a real earth-like texture to all of the work that they're producing. It's something that is come out of a passion from either one person, a founder, or a partnership. And I think
you get that, and it's amazing. Sorry, go on.
No, we see some of that in your work, and certainly in your artwork. And I think that as we move this towards your billboards, I want to take you back to your first billboard. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I do actually. And you know what? I might even have it.
Yeah, go on.
Should I get it out?
Get it.
Is this like? It looks like it's completely set up. If this has not been set up, nice boiler suit, Dave.
Thank you. Well, it's. I've just realised that when you're in the studio, there's no point in having nice clothes.
Oh, I think it suits you.
Thank you.
in a sort of, shabby chic sort of fashion. I'll leave it there.
I mean, I've got. Oh, maybe I haven't got it. It was for Atari.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
That's how long ago that was.
Did you laminate? Is it laminated?
All these laminates, yeah.
Good man. It's only any good if it's laminated.
Yeah. And it was. Maybe I haven't got it.
Was it a space?
And it was just a close up of the game. I mean, it was so. But that was the first. It was a 6-sheet.
Right.
No, I can't find it.
So you'll have to send it to us afterwards because we'll put it on the feed.
I'll see if I can dig it out somewhere. I thought I had it, but it was just a kind of a picture of. It was like a road racing game, but it was like sort of bitmapped beyond belief. It was awful, but it was just.
Was it a proper 8-bit game?
Huh?
It was an 8-bit game.
8-bit game, and it was kind of on the road, and you would go round, and it was like that, and it was just kind of. I can't even remember what the line was, but it was just big, bold, very graphic, pink, green, fluoro colours.
Nice.
But, I remember doing that and being, fucking hell, we're going to get to do an Atari poster, 6-sheet poster. Because, that was my first job at TBWA. We were only going to be there a year. We were doing ads for Dunlopillow mattresses that they were putting in Arabic magazines, selling them to Iraqi prisons was the kind of work I was doing. All the sort of shit that no one else wanted to do, they give it to you. And it was, shit rolls downhill. And so when we got the posters, it was great fun.
And did you, that's fascinating. When did you do, because I asked you to send me some stuff the other night. You sent me these brilliant Amnesty posters, which sort of, they subvert classic women's beauty and skincare ads. Could you just briefly explain them and tell us how you got?
Yeah, we did those at Karma Armour, and it was the first. I think it was. I can't remember when that was. It would have been about 2006, 2007, something like that. And Amnesty approached us, and it was the first domestic. Normally Amnesty International would do stuff where they're trying to get people out of prisons in Thailand or Mexico or whatever it might be, Guatemala. And human rights issues around the world, and this was the first one that they'd done on our soil, and it was something that I just found completely harrowing, the domestic violence. And but one of the things that I found really interesting about it is that I don't think it wasn't passed as a crime until something like 1984.
Wow.
And when you started to hear all the facts and figures, I mean, it was unbelievable. And so it was something that really needed doing. And the thing that we found very interesting was the fact that it is just so normal, and it was so nobody ever challenged it. Nobody thought it was an outrage because it just carried on.
Yeah.
And so that's where the idea came from, which was to create this concealer brands that would help women who, in the same way that 30 years ago, saying you had erectile dysfunction was an embarrassment, whereas now, you're dropping vitamin V like it's Smarties. And it's just, and I think in the same way that we thought, isn't it interesting that if there was a world where a makeup brand or a concealer brand created a product for women who were in abusive relationships and just totally normalizes it? Yeah, abuse happens at home. So we've created this product that, it's like adults wearing nappies because of incontinence. I just found that whole twist of that world where we don't talk about it, but now it's completely normalized. And so we did it. And of course, we knew it was going to create it created a lot of tension within Amnesty because they were, they get attacked an awful lot. Yeah. And obviously a lot of people would read it as that's us kind of taking the piss, or that's us glorifying domestic violence. And it was never intended to do that. It was done to get the viewer to go, hold on a second, is this, what the fuck is happening? Yeah. And that's what I love about advertising and propaganda as an example, is it makes you think, and it gives you 3/4 of the information so that you fill in the blank. And that's the role that I think consumers play in movies, in great art, in great music, in great advertising, great, anything that's communicating with them. The consumer has a role to play in that. And so we wanted to do something that was purposefully controversial, and it really.
When you did it, because I sort of, knowing you as I do and looking at your stuff, it feels like this is quite you, this sort of work. You know, like you talk about, you can just, there's a lot of work you do and you think, oh, I'm just doing it in advertising. But there's some projects you go, fuck, this is me, I'm right. This is exactly what I want to do. When you got your teeth into that sort of thing, did it sort of, you know, influence you a bit and going, actually, yeah, this is Dave Buonaguidi, this is what I want to do. And did that sort of, do you always have that little voice in the back of your head thinking, yeah, it's not out there, though, is it? You know, do you always have that sort of little desire to have some edge to stuff?
But that was into me. Yeah, that was sort of brought into me when I worked at Hal Henry. I mean, you know, when I left WCRS and went to HHCL, when it was like there were 5 people there, and you know, Steve Henry and Axel Chaldecott were like my bosses, but they were also my bosses at WCRS when I was in their group, and so, you know, they always had this thing which, like, you know, every single piece of work you do has to be fucking good. And, you know, you'd show Steve and Axe were impossible to show him work. You'd show him a piece of work and they go, yeah, you can't do that. They did that in Japan in 1952. And you go, for fuck's sake, you know. They go, yeah, but I know, and now you know, and you should be ashamed of doing something that someone else has done. So the kind of level of thinking and level of work and the amount of work that you would have to produce just to get through Steve and Axe was extraordinary. But it's like being in the army. You know, once you've been in the army for 10 years, you know how to make your bed. Yeah. And after a while, you just get programmed into what's the point in doing something just to smuggle it through? You should be doing something that sends a bit of a flare up. And
I remember going to see Trev and Al with me and Adam at our book, and we used to go along, and they're quite nicely coloured in layouts, and Trev would go, why are you colouring it in? And he's saying, you think that's good, don't you? You think it's so good that you're going to colour in every bit of that. And honest to God, it was horrific, because you're going, oh shit. And you go, do not come back with anything other than a stick, man. And we learned then to just never, you know, don't fucking laminate it or colour it in if it's no good. You know, wait till I tell you. And it was a real education. Sadly, we never got in at Hal Henry. We ended up at BBH. I always thought we were slightly wrong for BBH, because Hal Henry had our same sort of slightly, you know, mad attitude. But I can see that. Like you said, once it's inside you, it doesn't leave you, does it?
No, you just get, and it's that thing of when you do something that people talk about. You know, it was always that desire, and ultimately, I think Hal Henry used to talk about. They were talking about Crispin Porter actually back in the day, about the way that, you know, they would do stuff, and they would start with a press release first when they were pitching to clients. They'd start with a press release, and it was like, this is what we want you to visualize. This is what you want to achieve. And it was just a really interesting way of doing it. And of course, because Hal Henry were small and they were the challenger brand to all the other agencies we were pitching against at the time, you could, you know, it was all about the shock of the new, you know, do stuff that people are going to talk about, do stuff that scares the shit out of people. And you could do that. It was pre-internet. So, you know.
Where did you do the, where did you do the direct ski stuff?
That was Panorama as well. That was a funny one. That was a client who came to us.
Funny. Yeah. Can you just describe them?
Well, this guy came to us. These 2 Irish guys, they're 2 brothers, and their dad owned this business called Direct Ski. And they came to us and they said, oh, would you be interested in doing some work for us? And we were like, yeah, of course. And then we talked to them and they said, ultimately, we haven't got that much money. And we said, well, I'll tell you what, instead of giving us money, how about you give us a bit of fee, and then every year you give us a chalet and some ski passes. And they were like, fucking perfect. Because, you know, they get chalets for nothing and they get ski passes for nothing. And it was like, hold on, we got this agency doing work for us. And so we just said, fine. And it was really seasonal. You know, they were only going to do one burst of activity every year, and they would give us a ski chalet that we would then take people from the agency, or, you know, the whole agency would go out there at one stage.
Wow.
And these 2 guys were very, very antagonistic to all of the, you know, Crystal and all of the bigger posh brands. Direct Ski were like the Exchange and Mart of ski holidays. And so they were like, they'd come into the office, and I'm not going to do an Irish accent, but they were like, fuck all those posh twats. We want to try and get normal people to do it. And so one campaign was, you know, him democratizing skiing, standing on the top of a mountain, delivering this sort of speech, holding his skis on the mountaintop in the dramatic snow, saying, you know, we want to make skiing affordable for everyone, even Geordies. And we picked Geordies because they were the people that least go skiing. But of course, the Geordies looked at it and went, "What, are we like the fucking lowest people on the spectrum?
Right.
Even for us to be affordable?" And it wasn't done like that. But in a way, by creating that controversy, I mean, it got on the news, and there were Geordie newscasters getting really angry about it. There was another even funnier one the following year that was, we want to get Shazza and Kevin on the slopes, not just Binky and Hugo. And if you were called Binky or Hugo, you wouldn't be able to book a. You wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't be able to book a holiday, and if you were called Shazza or Kev, you got 20% off.
Oh, that's genius!
You could suggest that to the client, and he would just go, "Fucking great idea! Let's just do it." Because it was there. It was those three guys, the dad and the two boys, were the business.
And they loved it. It feels so much noise. It feels a bit we talked to Neil's a bit like the guy who runs Brewdog. I can't remember his name, but it's quite someone who wants, like you say, to make a mark and shake things up. And this thing always surprises me. You look at those; they're really funny, those ads. And like you say, you do a double take and you go, "What?" But you're still all you're doing is printing some words on a poster on a wall. You're not like, I mean, the maddest thing I ever did was try to do ads from a war zone, and we did them, and it was really scary actually, because people could die live on air, and it never happened. And ever since that's happened, I've never been scared of any idea. And it's fascinating, isn't it, how people can be so frightened of just such a worrying you're going to upset someone, when in fact you're only going to make your mark if you stop someone. You don't want to do it by a gratuitous, senseless reason.
Now where social media plays such an important role in the decision-making process and also the reaction to things. So you do an ad or you do anything and you get 50 complaints and they fucking react, which I just think is really poor, But, it's part of the modern world. You've got to navigate around that. But, back in those days with direct ski, they didn't care. And also if people complained about it, they just go, fuck off.
Yeah.
It's our business. We can do whatever we want. Yeah. And I love that kind of attitude.
It's like Paddy Power, aren't they? They were like Paddy Power, very much a modern day version of that, which some of the stuff I really don't like, but some of the stuff I just go, you got it so spot on. The football, some of the radio ads they do.
I mean, that Paddy Power ad that they did at Crispin Porter before I went there, I still think it was the one where he was at Ascot when he was shooting women with it. Yeah, I look at that, I watch it again and again. I just think it's the cutest, just best thing ever.
Yeah,
I've worked with Paddy Power on 2 different occasions, and they were a nightmare to work with.
Yeah,
but they pushed you, and you ended up doing something that was going to make you.
I remember going for an interview at Crispin, talked to Matt and Ben about it, and they said they used to talk about Paddy Power, and they said at any time of the day or the night they'd send a brief through, because they were, they're betting and things are changing all the time. So they sort of said, if you work here on that, you basically have to be on all the time, because they expect them to be on all the time, which sort of made me a bit nervous about going there. No, it didn't work out. But yeah, there are clients like that which they expect the same, don't they?
Well, I mean, they would sit there as an example. When we first started working with them at Karma Armour, they would go, "We want 4 ads," and we go, "All right, fine, we can do that." And then, and we had our own in-house production company that could do those as well. So we were, cutting out huge wastes of external production companies, and then they would go, "How much is it going to cost?" And we'd go, "This much," and they go, "Right, well, you've got half of that. If you want to do this, you've got half. And you've got to do it in 2 days, not 4 days." So you're shooting 2 ads in a day.
Wow. Right.
And so, it changes everything, because it affects the way that you write, because it's not, open on a football pitch anymore. It's open in a studio that's, lit. So you've got the control of having 24 hours a day, but it has a massive effect on the creativity. But I found that the relationships with every client I worked on, whether it was IKEA, Costa, Nintendo, everyone was the same. It was all like, last year you did it for, this much. Next year you got half.
Yeah.
And it's up to you, like, how badly do you want that business? And after a while, what happens is you realize that you're not making any money on it. The morale, the bullying, and the terrible experience that you're having has a fundamental effect on the well-being of the individuals working on that business, or the agency overall, and so you have to resign it, and then they go off and they do it with somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take you on to make tea, not war, just as I think it's a nice segue to it, because you're doing something out of a personal passion and something that you wanted to make a poster, and you've made a poster. Something.
Yeah.
I mean, it might go down as the best in-house ad of all time, maybe.
Well, maybe I'll take that.
But, I mean,
go on.
Yeah, go on.
No, you go on.
I was just going to say, did you expect it to end up on the front pages of newspapers and in museums?
Absolutely not. We used to do karma projects, what we called karma projects, where we would try and do some, the whole basis of Karma Armour was to do the right thing, to do good, and then that would benefit all of us. Apart from the fact that, the two founders, Buonaguidi and Ramchandani, I mean, you were never going to name it after yourselves, but it was, we had a history of doing that. When we did St. Luke's, there were 6 of us who founded that agency, but there were 30 staff when we started. So it wasn't really, we didn't really want to name it after ourselves. And also it was just a nice way of getting out of that thing of, here are the names of 4 nice white middle-class boys from London who are going to set up another business and they'll name it after themselves. And so when we did karma projects, and we'd done loads of them before, I mean, we did one where Naresh and I would drive around and there was an Oasis poster where they did an album called Standing on the Shoulder of Giants.
Yeah.
And it's the shoulder. So we just printed an S, and we would just drive around and stand on the roof of the car and put an S on the top of the poster. It was just stupid stuff that didn't mean anything. And so when we did Make Tea Not War, I was working with a guy. We had a guy called Scott Leonard who's got his own agency now, and he came in and we were working together on various other clients. And he just said, he was the one who suggested it. He said, there's the War March coming up, we should do something. I said, yeah, fucking great idea. So we sat down and chatted. The first idea that we thought was really funny was, why go to war when you can go to Wales? But it was too long. And so we came up with this Make Tea Not War. When you look at the poster up close, it's the worst retouching, because I managed to find a picture of old man Kalashnikov, who actually made the gun, and then just comped Tony Blair's head on it, and then comped a teacup on his head.
Genius.
None of it makes sense. It's just absolute cock, really badly cut out. And so we printed 100 of them, stuck them on placards. We did it with, what were they called? Jack Jones, well, Cunning Stunts, I think, did it for us. And we just, they printed them, stuck them on banners. I think we did literally like 100, and they just gave them out on the march. And then the following morning, I went down to the paper shop and saw it on the front of, the Times, and it was in every paper. But it was also because I remember we had this discussion, like we said we should put our name on it. And nobody had heard of us. We were like 3 years old. We didn't exist in the advertising world as a entity. We weren't an ad agency. We were a weird little creative company that was doing design work. We were writing TV shows with Alison Jackson. We did everything as well as advertising. We did loads of other stuff. So we thought it was right and fitting that we should have our name on it for 2 reasons. One, I think when you're a creative entity, when you're a creative company, you have a right to be creative. And if you can't do it for your clients, then you should do it for yourself. And so Karma projects and the products that we used to make were all part of our output. And we used to use those as marketing tools. So, we won a lot of business off the back of Make Tea Not War, because lots of clients don't want to spend any money, do very little, and get on the front page of the Evening Standard. It's like, that's what they all want.
There's a nice synergy going back to the book from your grandmother as well. That this is there's a real passion project there that was bubbling away.
I felt like it was an absolute perfect storm for me, which was, hold on, I get to do something that I joined the ad business for that I've never been able to do in advertising, because you're not allowed to have in advertising. The thing that I really miss is you're not allowed to have a personality. You've got to sell a product to a load of people to millions of people that bland and unifying personality. Whereas when you can sit there and stand up and go, we think the war is about, how many agencies would turn around and go, we're going to go against the government and criticize them and say that we think the war is a bad idea? You can't, no one would do it.
I mean, It's quite interesting because we were talking to Rich Denny at St Luke's about the SHN stuff that he did, and obviously that was that was not paid. This is not paid. There's a real. I think our industry has a lot to learn from people such as yourself, where there is a passion project, there is a reason to do something, whether it's for public service or whether it's just for being creative, to continue to run those passion projects. The podcast for Hugh and I is a passion project. We're here to talk about great work so that other people can hear about great work. My friend Julia Willems wrote an excellent blog piece that we contributed to the other day about how important it is for creative people to have a passion project that is not fee paying. It's something that you really want to do. It's something, whether it's making biscuits or making posters, it doesn't matter. If you've got something, do it and go and get creative with it.
That's a great point, Dan. I just want to jump in there because when I saw this Make Tea Not War and it had Karmarama, I was like, what's all that about? And then it sort of made me think, well, I thought it was cool and silly and bonkers. And it made me think of what Kessels Kramer used to do, some of the stuff they had going. And me and Adam used to love that sort of shit because it was just sort of slightly unexplained. And like Dan's saying, once you have that little release, I remember Mother used to have Mother projects, didn't they? They had the football hooligans, the little soldiers. Nick Bell used to call it Oxygen.
All of that stuff was so inspiring.
Yeah, and I suppose...
Well, it becomes a really good to sell to clients. I remember Eric and Johan, we hired them at Chait Day when they were still in Amsterdam. So when they came over, fucking hell, the films that Johan would shoot on his own, he'd just go off with his Bolex and shoot movies. They'd just shoot amazing stuff, but they would do it all. It was like being at art college. I remember they did a couple of films for the agency that were just amazing, and Eric and his desire to. I mean, they're pure creative people that just happen to sort of look for advertising to fulfill them. But it never fulfilled either of them because you look at Kessels Kramer, not really an ad agency, or it was probably half an ad agency. The rest of it was a vehicle for them to express themselves in a different way, and
it's a bit
I think
like
we were lucky.
It's a bit like the Glue Society as well. There's sort of people that pop up, and I think I love things like that. I'm fascinated by them because they're kind of on the edge. They're not the sort of advertising agencies, but just a bit on this, pushing it out there. And you want it always to be like that because that's the exciting bit. And it's sad, isn't it, when that?
But I'm just not sure. But all of those agencies were set up not to sell. In the same way that Hegarty did not set up BBH to sell it to anybody. They had do that towards the end when they were getting on and they wanted to do something, then fair enough. But they didn't have a 5-year window. I don't think Kessels Kramer, and knowing Eric and Johan, having worked with them, there's no way they set up that business to sell it. Karmarama was not set up to sell. But I do sometimes wonder, I don't know whether Nils, who knows whether there's an attitude now with a lot of agencies which is you can do something, you can be good for like 4 or 5 years, and then you sell it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting I'm trying to think who, what, why. I like what they do, quite a lot of stuff, because it feels... Yeah. I know Matt and Ben and Sean, and I was really freaked out when I saw it. It's like 3 creative blokes. Oh, my God, no. But, it's working, so I'm good on them, Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is are you doing it because you want freedom to work with the kind of people you want to work with, to do it the way that you want to do it? Or are you doing it as a way of just set up a flare and then WPP or Accenture will come along and snap you up for a big fee?
Because I think, just speaking personally, I'm doing writing now and this, what we're doing today, and I'm doing all the things I sort of like. I'm getting fuck all money, and I go and work freelance and try and, get some money back. But the stuff I'm passionate about at the moment is really, it's all there. And it is perverse at times, isn't it? It's always, what was it? Somebody said advertising, people mistake it thinking it's art. It's not. It's where art meets commerce. And that's
it's not.
No, you don't think?
Yeah. Not at all. I think I would say it was a creative business a few years ago. I don't think it's a creative business anymore. I think it's a functional, scientific. It's like, advertising is like engineering. Here's a problem. throw a load of people at it and solve it.
Yeah.
And it's fine tuning and electrical engineering, and it's a very, very sort of, I think, dictatorial science. It's smart, and it requires smart people, but there aren't that many big opportunities anymore to do anything that's going to transform a client's business overnight from being, nothing to being something as a result of one piece of work, which I think used to happen a lot more in the old days.
Can I ask you, so this is absolutely fascinating chatting on. I'm going to divert ever so slightly off billboards onto a book, but it's going to bring us back to what you're doing now. So when you wrote Blah, 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 your book, was it a kind of cathartic moment, a sort of waving goodbye to the industry, knowing you were going to sort of go off and pursue something else? Was it a nice pivot moment? You go, right, I've done that, I've had it. Was that the intention, or did it evolve like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And why did you
totally.
write it?
I mean, it was because I used to kind of do lots of talks, and I'd have opinions about creativity that I would talk to students about, and then you do presentations to Time Inc. or to somebody about how to challenge this and think differently and all that kind of stuff. And I just kept, and what I do is I kind of write them down as a stream of consciousness and then put them into a deck. And so I had it all written down, and I did a talk at what's it called? Time Inc., I think it was.
Right.
Life or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And a bloke came out of the crowd and said, "Oh, that was really good, thank you. Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, maybe you should." He said, "Have you got any more of this stuff?" And I said, "Mate, I've got fucking piles of it." And so I sent him a whole load of stuff, and he said, "Oh, this is quite good. You should think about writing a business book." And I said, "Well, but it's not really a business book. I've got no qualifications. All the businesses that I've done have all failed horribly for me, and so I don't know. Am I there to spout off about my business acumen? I don't know, fuck all." And he said, "No, but it's just kind of interesting. It's kind of amusing." I think it was also a way of him making some money out of me.
Well, I mean,
I felt
I love
it was a massive moment. Yeah,
I love the ads for it. Did you write your own ads for them?
Yeah, of course.
They're good lines.
A book about a business you don't care about by a bloke you've never heard of. Yeah, I mean, it's how compelling is that?
Yeah, no, the other one is if you're only going to read one book, read this one after it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there were loads. Loads of parts of it. But I think it was something that was driven by when you set up an agency that I think has an effect on the industry. So I think there should have been a book about GGT. There should have been a book about Doyle Dane. I think there was a book about Doyle Dane Bernbach. There was a book, Ogilvy wrote his book. Hal Henry should have written a book. I think St. Luke's wrote a book. Andy Law wrote it. It was a massive work of fiction, but it was the idea behind it was kind of there was a good story in there. And I remember talking to people at Carmarthen about it and saying we should do a book, and it should be a business tool. We should have an opinion about business. We should have an opinion about work. Company, the way that we employ, the way that we look after our staff. Fucking hell, we did lots of things that were pretty interesting. And I remember talking to my partners, and they just looked at me like I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I don't want to write a book."
Right.
Yeah, because it means you've got to work later than 5 o'clock,
Yeah, okay.
And so I just thought, fuck it, I'll write it myself. And it was more of a cathartic thing for me, which was just to go through, tell some stupid stories of things that I'd experienced in my career, but then also sort of put a button on the whole business for me, which was just to go.
Were you just sticking a stake in the ground and say, this is me, I'm done? Yeah.
Drop mic, yeah.
But then you did, I'm just trying to get to the last bit, which is the real Hackney Dave and what you're doing now. But there was a period where you were doing the Always a Good Idea maps. You'd started doing them, but then you went to Crispin for a bit. So was that the last? But then were you sort of? It looks to me like you sort of knew you were going to go and do what you're doing now. Had you been doing? When did you do the Always a Good Idea maps? Because was that the first thing you did? You thought, fucking hell, this is good. I love this. I want to do this more. No.
I did. No, it was so 20. I mean, I was always making stuff, clocks and stuff, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And I got into screen printing. The first thing I did was I did a series called Dalston-sur-Arc, which was this fictitious alpine village where I would shoot scenes in Dalston, like the local Tesco, which looked shit. But then when you put a mountain range behind them, they just look amazing. And it was all driven by going skiing with my kids once. And there was a pound shop in this village, and it was a shit little pound shop. But because it had the Alps behind it, you just went, fuck me, isn't that beautiful? So I did this whole scene of, Dalston Junction train station with the Alps behind it. And it was just this fictitious, and I wanted to create an entire valley in London. So you'd have Brixton, Sulanena, and then you'd have all these different ski resorts that would all have.
Can you send us those? Can you send us those when you get a minute?
Yeah, you can have a set. I think I've still got some somewhere. So I did those as litho in the end because we couldn't screen print them because they were too complicated. But I'm just trying to see if there are any around it. Another one.
Talk amongst yourselves while we're waiting.
Yeah, so here's one of the Oxfam shop.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Rue de Kingsland, Dalston-sur-Arc, and it's got the Oxfam shop and all the other shit shops, but with a mountain range behind it. It's really easy to do,
nice.
but it was just good fun. And I did that, and then I also did this thing with Jealous Gallery where do you remember when Charles Saatchi strangled his missus?
Allegedly.
He also had a book out that said, Be the Worst You Can Be, or something like that. And on the front cover, he's painted red with horns.
Yeah.
And so I bought a shop dummy on eBay and went down to TK Maxx and got a suit and built this full-size model of Charles Saatchi complete with a red head. If you type in Charles Saatchi statue, you'll see it will come up. And you could interact with it. So it had an interactive arm that you could strangle yourself. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And had it in the agency, and they were shitting themselves because they were like, "Pussy's quite excellent." And they were like, "If Charles Saatchi finds out about this, we're fucking dead." And so I sent an email to 3 galleries, didn't know any of them, just went Galleries London, Contemporary Art Galleries London. One of them was Jealous Gallery. Sent an email to Dario, who's the owner,
right?
The owner of it, and said. Only said, and I sent another one to Lazaridis as well and a couple of other places, and it just said, "Do you want to do something naughty?" There was nothing else.
Right.
No one responded. Dario responded literally within 2 minutes.
Oh, brilliant.
And what is it, you fucking wanker? And I said, all right, I sent a picture. I just said, it's Charles Saatchi. And he went, right, get it over to the gallery in Crouch End now.
Right.
So I put it in a van, in the back of a fucking rented van, drove over to Crouch End, lugged it into the gallery, and he then put a sign on it saying, "This is by a young unknown British artist," which I found very funny, not a middle-aged cynical one,
nice.
But a young unknown British artist, and you can interact with it and get a selfie taken with Charles Saatchi strangling you.
I've just done a Google search, and I can see the sign that was printed next to it. Please note, this is not Charles Saatchi. Please feel free to take a picture of yourself being strangled by not Charles Saatchi on your mobile phone.
So that I did that on a Saturday, and then on the Wednesday I was in Italy on holiday, and I had a copy of The Sun, and I opened it up, and it was on page 4.
Oh my god!
And I suddenly went, "Fucking hell!
Fuck!
This is really interesting because I've done." And of course, the agency was shitting themselves,
I bet.
but it never got out that it was me.
Wow!
But it got me into a lot of trouble in my own. But at the time, I suddenly thought, you know what? Fuck all this stuff. I spend millions of pounds with hundreds of people and loads of man hours trying to create something that's that I have to buy advertising space in The Sun, and I can do this for a laugh. And because it's using the same application, the same brief structure, and the same idea plan as you would do in advertising, which is to make noise, to cut through, to do something that's of the zeitgeist, you can get it in the fucking paper. Yeah. And all right, I didn't get any credit for it, but Jealous did, and they were brilliant at fending off people saying you're glamorizing violence. I said, no, it's not about that at all. It's taking the piss out of somebody who does that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's a real eye opener for me because I suddenly went, hold on, there might be something in this that I can do an idea, I can make it, and then it can get lots of noise as a result of that.
So then, yeah, because it's really fascinating that. I love that story. So then how soon was the sort of jump or leap or pathway or whatever to the maps and the always a good idea?
Well, I might have been doing some maps in 2014, beginning of 2014. I think what it was is I started doing maps when I went to a flea market somewhere and found a box of these really nice folding maps. And I think also when you work in advertising, it's like, what can I do that's different to what everybody else is doing? Every other artist starts with a blank piece of paper. Maybe if I do something else, if I print propaganda onto things I find, I love all those old propaganda posters or the posters that they did for the Paris 68 student riots and all that kind of stuff, or the uprising. And so there was a kind of rawness and an energy to sort of, and also in advertising, you put words on pictures. And so what if you could find pictures that already existed and then put words on top? I found all these old maps and started doing jokes about those areas. So I found an old map of Newcastle, found a funny Geordie joke. What's the difference in a kangaroo? What's a kangaroo in Geordie or something? It's the noise a bloke makes when he's stuck in a lift. I can't remember. It was some stupid joke, but printed that on this one-off map. But it was like I suddenly realised, hold on a second, this is really difficult because I've got to do one joke per map.
Right.
Is there any way that I can get a generic message that I can put on a map? First ones I did were let's go get lost together in white.
Yeah.
So it was just like I think there's something beautiful about maps because you put one on a table, everyone wants to go and have a look at it. I mean, apart from the fact that they are beautiful pieces of work, and they were all done at the turn of the century. Now they're completely obsolete. It's a horrible fucking app on your phone that talks to you. Whereas in those days, it was printed on linen paper, backed with linen, the colours. I mean, just stunning.
Yeah.
And then you get it. And also there's that desire for me to sort of upcycle. You get something that's in a box under the stairs and then you put it pride of place on a wall. And it's a beautiful process, that. And so I think I was doing version of maps sometime in 2014 when I left Karma. They put me on gardening leave for a year. So I wanted to set up another agency. So when I resigned, they go, oh, you're not allowed to work and we're going to kill your spirit.
Right.
And so I kind of thought, well, I've got a year where I don't have to do anything. And need to start then thinking about what the next iteration, because I kept doing this thing where I do St. Luke's, become disillusioned with it, leave, go to Channel 4, set up 4 Creative there, become disillusioned with it, Karma. We went through so many entities in the first 10, 15 years. By the time I got to year 14, I was really done with it. And then it was like, I'm going to go and set up another agency where I can have fun again doing what I like doing. And then I just thought, you know what, you're fucking mad. You keep doing the same thing with the same result. And so I did this screen printing course at Print Club and then suddenly thought, hold on a second, this is what I need to do because
can I just
it's
jump
100 yards away.
Let me just jump in there quickly. That's a really interesting moment. So just doing a little course might have, because what I've observed a bit in our chat and knowing you and seeing your stuff is, like you said, you had done the same thing over and again and you get frustrated, don't you? Because you're getting taken away from the creative bit, which you clearly love and adore. And also you've got this brilliant drive about, getting a mannequin of Charles Saatchi and driving across London to make it, you got that brilliant combination of being creative and making what shit to happen. They're absolutely crucial to what we do. So I imagine you probably got elevated. It's that thing, isn't it? You get promoted beyond, you're taken away from the bit you love. So then did that course take you all the way back to sort of home in a way, Yeah,
I mean, it got big. Karma, when I left, I think it was about 250 people.
Yeah.
I prefer them when they're small. There were lots of arseholes in the business as well who were all in it for various different reasons. They didn't believe any of the mantra of the agency anymore. And I think I'd just become a blockage. And I was just hating every minute of it. I mean, I just looked at all the people and I just thought, what the fuck am I doing working with you people? Just couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
And so then when I did the course, it was very liberating because it was a one-day course. It was more of a kind of, beginner's course. I'd done screen printing when I was at college back in the 80s, had completely forgotten about it. And suddenly went, hold on a second. When I come here, I can come up with an idea really quickly. I can make it really quickly and I can start selling it really quickly in a morning.
Yeah. So what I was thinking, Dave, is
I need 3 weeks to get everybody in a meeting room.
Yeah, you became, I saw this morning, you're creative, you're the client, you're the producer, and you're the craftsman. And then you sold it.
Yeah.
And in a way, you sort of got that creative control back, which, is sort of fascinating.
And the experience that you get from advertising and how you sort of understand consumers, understand the market, look at what you could do is really, really valuable. But it just shortcuts all of that, because getting to market is so much quicker and so much more fun.
So say you've set this up, right? You're Real Hackney Dave, and you're doing the maps. I'm fascinated, actually, how does it work? So, because, you've done them everywhere, Suffolk's a good idea, always a good idea. New York's always a good idea. You did that. And you're like, hey, it's a campaign. There's more than one. It's brilliant, right? You can just do anywhere in the world. Ace. And very, like you said, same line. But do you make them, you find a map and you go, you know what, I'll do one on Bali? Or does someone ring you up and say, Dave, can you do one for me on Cleethorpes? Do you know what I mean? How does it work? And then do you charge more for that? Say again? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of all of those things, really. So the other day I bought a whole load of beautiful old printed atlases of the world. So little, pages of an atlas. And then you go through all of the books. So I went through each of the different books and sort of found seven Australia images,
right?
7 England, 7 Scotland, 7 New Zealand. And then what I do is I kind of categorize it. So I sort of go, right, I know if I do 7 Australia ones, they'll go.
Right. If
I do, 7 Portugal or Lithuania, I'm not going to sell them.
No.
And so you kind of basically break them into New Zealand, America, New York, cities, Paris. You know that they're all going to, because they're more popular than some of the other places. And then for the other ones, you then, for some of these smaller ones I've got where you've got, Europe or Spain or whatever it might be, I can do a whole bunch that are more generic. Let's go get lost together. Right. So it is really thinking like a campaign.
Yeah,
it's like, these are my big space. These are the small space replicas.
Yeah, it's
and you just do different versions.
You're like doing like 96 sheets, 28 fours.
Yeah. Because they're all one-offs, you tend to sort of go, as long as I can find 6 maps of Australia that are all roughly the same size, even though these are all slightly different, different border, the image size is pretty identical. So you can I can have one piece of artwork that will go through that, but then that's it. Then I'll stop doing it and I'll do another one.
So Dave, are you one of the foremost cartography collectors in the country now, with all the map books and stuff you're collecting?
Honestly, it was a funny one that will come on to, I think, another question later on. There was I did Cornwall's Always a Good Idea was the first one that I did with It's a Good Idea. And I was working, it was when we first set up Unlimited Ink, and I just literally printed up a load of them, and we were renting desk space in this place in Old Street, and the guy who owned it they had a big studio down in the basement where a big kitchen was set up, and they would film a lot of Jamie Oliver's stuff there, and he had an office next door. And I'd worked with Jamie Oliver at Karma Armour when we pitched for a piece of his, and we did some work with him on his restaurants. And so I kind of knew him, but I didn't know him massively well. And I read somewhere that Jamie had an argument with Gordon Ramsay, and Ramsay had called him fat or something like that. And Jamie had said, I don't want to get into a fight with him. We're all dads. No one wants to see your dad having a punch up in the car park outside the pub. He said, I'm just going to go to Cornwall and relax for the weekend and get over it. So I was like, oh, well, I've got this print. And I think I've done A up mid dark, and I've done a few of those sort of different slang phrases from each of the areas. And this guy who owned this property had one of my A up mid ducks on there, and he said, and I just said to him, listen, if Jamie pops in next week, tell him I'll leave him this Cornwall's Always a Good Idea. I read his story about Gordon Ramsay fight. Maybe he wants one. And he said, mate, honestly, he gets so many freebies. Thank you for the offer, but he won't have it. He won't take it. And I was like, fine, maybe he doesn't want it. I'll sell it to somebody else. And then didn't hear anything for about a week. Then the gallery where I was printing, Print Club, called up and said, what the fuck just happened? And I said, I had no idea. You tell me. They said, we've just sold literally 30 Cornwall's Always a Good Idea in literally 5 minutes.
Oh
what the fuck's happening? And I said, I have no idea. And then we saw that he posted it on his Instagram page that has 6 million followers. And so sales just went berserk. And so I've just always had this relationship with him since, which is whenever I do anything, I always give him a copy, so the little flower ones that I did recently. I always send him something, and I'll go around there, I'll drop it off, and he cooks me. We have a steak sandwich together, and then we just have this sort of odd relationship. But it's again, it's just putting yourself in that position where something interesting might happen.
But you're still acting like an ad man, which I love about it. I mean, I was looking at Chin Up Again, which is another lovely expression, and in essence, I don't want to dumb it down too much, but what you're doing in a way is you're looking around yourself all the time, and it's like being topical, isn't it? It's like looking for stuff, but doing it in your inimitable fashion. Now you've got this look and feel. I did a big pitch just before Christmas, and I was in an agency, and we were actually all talking about your stuff, and we go, "Oh, it'd be great to do it like that." And I said, "No, I don't think you can. I don't think you're allowed to do that. That's Dave's stuff." But it's got that, it's seeped out a long way. But I love the way you reinvent it. Like, when I first saw the Good Idea stuff, I thought, "Oh, that's cool. Dave Buonaguidi's done that thing." And then I saw this Northern Ireland, which is fucking hilarious. Northern Ireland, I'll do, and you start drilling through into it, and you're going, you're just using all your experience. And again, I thought, well, there's quite a lot of sweary stuff and funny stuff. But then when you did this one, what do you call this one, Dave? It's he, she, he loves her, she loves him, he loves him. It's all overlapped and mashed up. I love that. What was the reason behind that?
It was just trying a different thing. And it was, I'm trying to do a series called 7 Deadly Sins, where taking all of the 7 deadly sins and overlapping them all. So you just create, I love typography, but sort of, can you do something where you play with layering and colors? And I love using all of the fluoro colors, and especially the effect that they have on top of each other, because they're very, very thin. So when I print onto maps, you can still see the fluoro, you can still see the map underneath the fluoro ink.
Yeah.
If you want the fluoro to jump out, then you have to print a layer of white first, and then you print a layer of pink on top, and then red on top of that.
Right.
And so sort of. Sorry, what was the question again? I've lost myself.
It was just talking about how you move it along. So you've sort of done a diversity message of love. He loves him, she loves her, he loves her.
Yeah. So that stuff. I mean, it was really just playing with those layers, but also I love the kind of the weird patterns that it creates, because when you get in close, it's almost like tartan, where you get these edges, and these very hard edges of typography all layering on top. And obviously the different formats that you do it in, normal screen printing, you start with the lightest color and go dark. So when you're doing 4-color, you start with yellow, then you go blue or pink, blue or purple, or magenta, and then black. Whereas obviously with fluoros, you put yellow down first, you're never going to see it. So you put yellow down second or third. So depending on whether you put blue or shot pink down first, and then put yellow on top of that, it would have an effect. And I just love that whole thing, playing with words. And it was done specifically for Valentine's. He loves her, she, and then did a kind of he loves him and a she loves her route. But I'm doing an edition of these sins later on this year.
Again, I'm fascinated by. I know nothing about printing. I used to be really shit on art direction. I'd always walk down the corridor and hope Andy Bird or Chris Chapman or Scott Sylvie, Roger Kennedy, anyone would make me and Adam's work look good. So I love hearing you talk about that. But always before that, you've got to have your idea. So you're sitting there and you're going, Valentine's Day's coming up. Yeah. I'm going to do that. So do you put aside time to like concept stuff, or does it just bob in, or do you go, fuck it, today I'm just going to do a load of good idea ones because I can't think of it? Do you have a sort of process?
Combination. I mean, it's like, I sort of sit there and I wait for stuff to happen. So obviously when things like the first pandemic, when the first lockdown happened, I was printing no snogging face masks with Jealous Gallery, and I printed, 900 of those. I thought it would be quite good fun to do Hackney dollars printed on sheets of toilet paper. Yeah. So, the masks went mad. They took off. The top toilet paper, I think I printed 200 of these, and they were like 20 quid. But then doing stuff like the keep your chin up, which was a phrase that was given to me when I broke my leg once. And I just thought it was so funny. I was lying on the floor and this bloke just walked past and said, keep your chin up. And I thought, yeah, nice one. Thanks. I'm sitting there with my leg all bent out of shape. And I just thought using art as a way to lift spirits. And I think in the same way that music has a massive effect on your mood when you're listening to it. I caught the virus this time last year, came out after 6 weeks. The entire country was in first lockdown and everyone was abiding by it. So there was no one around. So I just went up to Print Club, and which was just around the corner. It was completely empty. And I just started printing, but I didn't really know what to print because I was like, well, people are hoarding bog paper, fighting over food. How is art going to even become an interesting thing? And so I just started doing those posters. And when I did the Keep the Chin Up stuff, if you sent me a stamped address envelope, you'd get one for free. So I printed 1,000 of those.
Yeah.
And I was just doing it every day. Couldn't find any inks because all the shops were shut.
Okay.
And then you just fold them all up and then give them. So now I've done this new version, Keep Your Chin Up Again, was just because we've gone into second lockdown. But it was more just about, I think, the way that in advertising, you sit there and you react to stuff. You know, when something happens over there, you go, fuck, we can do this. In the same way that Make Tea Not War was like, that's an opinion that you can have.
What you've got now, your liberated thing is you're now not at the behest of a client thinking, our client wouldn't let me do that. You're, like I said earlier, you are the client and the producer. So you kind of, there is a sort of freedom there to just fucking go at stuff, right?
I tell you, the thing that used to kill me most was the rest of the agency, actually. You know, I used to dread presenting work to the rest of the agency because they weren't thinking like we all work at the agency. All they're thinking about is, I wonder what the client's going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they worked at the agency, they'd be sitting there going, great, how do we fucking make sure that this is, how do we do this so that the client really likes it? What can we do? What can we do to help? All they're thinking about is, client won't buy it. Yeah. Client won't buy it. Client will be scared. Or I feel, if I hear that phrase, devil's advocate, it's like, fuck off.
Yeah, I always used to say, you never know. Just let's go in and ask. You never know. And 9 times out of 10, it didn't work. But my last really brilliant client is this NHS guy who bought everything I showed him. And we ended up, we haven't quite done it yet, but we ended up making a pair of shoes for nurses. So I'm still in the middle of trying to make that happen. I can't say too much more. But he was an incredible guy. So you're still only as good as your client, aren't you? And
yeah.
But there's no harm in pushing people as hard as you can.
But the internal structure is so important that everybody has to fucking be in it, to make it.
And just going full circle, Dave. We talked about the kind of those small boutique agencies who kind of I know hugely reliant. Run one as well. We were a very small business, a cottage industry business for a while, and you are at the behest of a fee-paying client. But do you think it's easier to have, when you've got someone like a founder talking to a client saying, "No, I really believe in this work," and maybe they're talking to other small clients, they're not talking to Glaxo, and they're not talking to IBM. They're talking to kind of clients that fit the size of the agency that they have started. I think it's easier to have those conversations. Yeah. There's less stomachs to go through.
Yeah, totally. And I love dealing with founders. There was something we were talking about. One of the things that I worked on was the launch of Costa in this country, and I loved working on that. One, because they were all old Italians; they were like my dad. It was just nice. When we first started working with them, they'd just done a deal with Whitbread, where they were kind of talking about now expanding the offer. And the first poster that we did, "Saving the World from Mediocre Coffee," came from going into an all-staff company meeting at the brewery in Chigwell Street, where the CEO stood up and said, "We're in the business of making great coffee," and the room just fucking erupted. There were probably like 2,000, 3,000 people there, and it still makes the hair on my arm stand up. It was like a political rally, and then he says, "We're in the business of saving the world from Starbucks," and I just went, "Fuck," fuck, and wrote that down. And then we went back and we did that as a poster and presented it to them. And obviously you can't say Starbucks, so you do mediocre coffee, and everyone knows who you're talking about. But
that's a polite way of saying it, isn't it?
Yeah, it was polite. But the interesting thing is, the client at Starbucks at the time then employed us further down the road when he took over another piece of business, because he said, "When I first started working at Starbucks, you made my life fucking hell because you just destroyed me. You just annihilated me, And so I want to have you on my side this time. And that was a very touching moment because it was like, wow,
That's
the impact that...
Very you, Dave. Very Buonaguidi, I'd say. Dave, we come to the end. We've got to end. Couple more things. Favourite billboard of all time? Have you got one?
I did fucking say to you, do I need to do any homework? And you said, no.
It was just in the document on the last page. Right, wait, leave that for a minute. Tips. Any tips for kids coming in to the creative industry? I mean, I suppose we've covered this a bit, haven't we? But, when you're looking at posters or simplicity, do you have any little rules you always abide by or little kind of ticks that you...
Well, I mean, it's not that it's going to have any effects because I would say, keep it simple, but the people you're working for and with are not interested in keeping it simple because everybody in the ad agency on the account management side just put as much information as the client wants in it, and the client says, this is how much information I've got. So you got to do it. My tip would be going back to something you said at the beginning, which is that your passion project, find out what it is that you really, really want to do in your life or the thing that really excites you, because I guarantee it's not advertising. And I would use advertising as a way to help you get there faster and get there better when you do get there. So if your thing is being very entrepreneurial and setting up your own business, then use the experiences that you're going to have in 5 years in the creative services business, advertising, design, whatever it might be. They're all the same these days. To end up advising you and giving you all of that critical information that you need to fulfill your real passion and your real dreams. In the same way I did. The problem I've got is I spent 35 years in a business going round and round in circles with people I didn't like, and now feel, I'm 57 now, but I feel like I'm 20 doing what I want to do in my own space, and it's amazing. And I can do what I want to do and have a huge amount of fun doing it and be myself, more importantly.
Dave, I think as we look through the body of work that we have done today, and we've talked about and your passion projects, and now what you're doing now with Real Hackney Dave, I think we can look back and look at that book that grandmother gave you of posters and simple slogans and the things that you've talked about today all come back to a passion project. So I think although you've had fun doing the agency stuff and you've kind of gone through iterations, you've got to the point of the passion project. And I think that has always, as we look back at and talking through this work, it stemmed from that point. And I think if, I'll probably hand you over a propaganda piece that's been, it's been duplicated on mugs and T-shirts and everything, but keep calm and carry on from back in those days. It's like a real simple government poster.
What I was actually going to say, I think that was probably one of my favourite posters. And I remember when I heard the story, and I know it's been obliterated now by every fucking the arsehole Photoshop. But when they found that poster folded up in a cupboard, and I think there's something fascinating about the language that it had, which was so kind of calm. Considering this is what happens when we get invaded by the Germans. Just follow these 6 words. It's insane.
It's akin to make tea, not war, as well. It's a real stiff upper lip Britishness about that message.
But it had a very kind of, you could hear the tone of voice. It was so beautiful. It wasn't delivering information. It was delivering kind of an attitude that was so volatile at the time, to sort of sit there and then respond with, keep calm and carry on. It's just beautiful. Carry on. Yeah. It's just incredible.
Yeah, well,
it's so British.
Yeah,
it's very British.
Pick up a cobblestone and put it through the face of the nearest policeman. Set fire to something. Whereas over here, it's like, stay calm, carry on.
Yeah. Well, I think
it's amazing.
I think it's a fitting thing to say. Can you please carry on as well? I think you're doing a brilliant job. I mean, I obviously follow you on Insta, and we know each other quite well. But I always find it really inspiring and funny, and I love your little monologues on Instagram. They're kind of giving David Cobalt's a little run for his money. The things. So please keep all that going. And I just want to say, wrap it up and say thanks.
He was massively inspirational. He's a great creative. And I remember when I first got Instagram, know how to use it. And then somebody said, "Have you seen Dave Colbert's stuff?" And I was like, "Fuck," and I had a look, and I just thought, right, now I know what to do.
Yeah, it's good. I love the fact that he just writes shitloads. Your stuff is great. I always know I'm in for a little treat, and there's quite a lot of copy. But no, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for all.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that was a fun hour and a half. It was brilliant having a little journey inside Dave Buonaguidi's mind.
I know. The one tip we have for you is don't get into advertising.
Yeah. It was like at the beginning I was thinking we got to get off the kind of anti-agency thing, because I still love advertising in the agency world. But I mean, we understand why he felt like that, what he does feel like that. You know,
he makes some really valid points, and I think that, you know, you and I have both, we've talked about this before. We felt the frustration of big agency life and the levels of complexity to getting things approved, and the rejections that you get for work that you know can stand the chance and can be amazing, and it being rejected for the wrong reasons, and, you know, having to work into those difficult clients. All of those things are right. He's correct. And we do wish that our agencies have had the balls to stand up for the work in a better way sometimes. And I think that it's a good message for us to heed as an industry. And what he's basically saying is challenge people more, challenge the client more, push creativity, and you'll be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you, and it's weird because I actually staggered that he lasted so long. You know, 14 years at Karmarama, and, you know, you do think he probably was frustrated, probably doing a great job, like setting these sort of organisations up, and he has this passion, this drive, and then, you know, finds it frustrating, and by the end just sort of legs it out of there. And then, like you said, he's done it several times, and then it feels like this time he's done the right thing for his own noodle. Because, you know, he's got got the creative power, isn't he, now to run his own thing.
And if we talk, there is a lot of talk at the moment and about our mental health, and, you know, we are increasingly more aware of our mental health given what we've been going through over the last year. Surviving using passion projects is the way that we get through this stuff. You know, whether it's cooking or smoking bits of meat on a barbecue in your garden, or screen printing down the road.
I thought you were smoking
really
some
strong
really
herbs.
decent grass. No, I mean, yeah, joking aside, you're right. I think you're very right to bring that up. You know, it's massive, the mental health stuff, and if you can absorb yourself into a passion project, whether that pays you nothing, whether you lose money on it, you know, whatever, or if it does make you money, just do it. I think that this seems to be a mantra. I mean, Hegarty, that was another piece of advice from him: find out what your passion is, and you know, just go for it. And I think that's such an obvious thing, isn't it, after all of this? But it still needs to be said, right? Yeah. Well, look, thanks, Dave Buonaguidi.
Let's be honest with each other. That's why we're doing this. This is a passion project for us. We love talking about it. We love doing the work, and we love talking to the people who've done the work too.
And I just love looking at your little face every day and your little jokes. You know, the way that's such a funny joke every week.
I like your little pixelated face.
On that note, let's say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Pixels.